Happy to have you along once again. We are joined, as always, by Greg Engert, beer director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, a James Beard Award nominee. The group includes Where We Are, Church Key, Downstairs, Birch and Barley. Greg, it is always good to see you.
See you too.
What is on tap this week? I'm liking what I'm seeing immediately.
Yeah. Two times. So this week, Founders Brewing Company out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, sent us out a couple beers that are very related to one another. One is called Doom, and this is going to be one that's, I'll be honest, is going to be harder to find, but definitely get out there and look for it. Call your favorite beer shops, look at your favorite bars, because there are some bottles still available. We still have some here at Church Key, in fact. And this is a beer that has never seen the light of day outside of Founders Brew Pub before, ever. Excuse me. So at the Brew Pub in Grand Rapids, they have a series of beers that they literally just keep on premise. And a couple years ago, they actually started to make larger batches, slightly larger batches of these beers, and release them to a wider national audience in very small amounts. So this is kind of our window on the brew pub experience at Founders. Famously, the second release in this backstage series was called Canadian Breakfast Stout, which is their amazing stout that's aged in bourbon barrels that have previously not just held bourbon, but also maple syrup. Fantastic beer and very, very hard to find. So that was the second one they did. They've done a number of others, Blushing Monk, Bolt Cutter, which was their anniversary beer that came out last year for the 15th anniversary, and now Doom. So with Doom, and the reason why we have two here, Doom is a bourbon barrel-aged beer, but unlike, say, like Canadian Breakfast Stout or even Kentucky Breakfast Stout, which just came out, KBS, this is not an Imperial Stout aged in bourbon barrels, or it's not a barley wine or a Scotch ale aged in bourbon barrels. Rather, it is an Imperial IPA, so very singular in the range of Founders Brewing Company. And it's not just any Imperial IPA, it is Double Trouble Imperial IPA, a 9.4% alcohol, West Coast style IPA, golden in color, really, really excellently bitter in the palate.
Nice.
Let's take a sip of this. Big, big tropical fruit aromas, lots of tangerine and apricot. Very fresh, floral.
It's really good. Not bitter at all.
No,
just
drying in the finish, earthy. Really great. And this is a good thing, is though Founders only sent us a little bit of Doom, they seem to have sent a lot more Double Trouble. So you will see that at least if you can't find the Doom. But side by side, it's fantastic, and that's what we're going to do right now. So 9.4% Imperial IPA, 86 IBUs, which is how we measure bitterness, which is very high. They then take that beer, and rather than just bottling or kegging it, they place it into bourbon barrels, bourbon oak barrels for 4 months. And that's when we come up with Doom. And even when you put them side by side, you'll see that Doom's got a little bit of a deeper golden quality to it, and that's definitely coming from the oak itself.
Beautiful color, too.
Beautiful.
It's not overpowering, but you know it's there.
And it's interesting, you've got the echoes of that tropical fruit and pine in the nose, but now we have the vanilla, the cream, almost coconutty qualities that come from the bourbon oak barrels layering over the top. And then a remarkably balanced character on the palate. A lot of sweetness coming through from the bourbon, hints of warming booze, great oak flavors. And then I love how the finish, it's still got a dryness to it, of course, very nice dryness, a little bit of bitterness, but rather than just being all hop bitterness, you've got a little bit less hop while it's still there, and then a fantastic drying tannic quality from the oak as well.
I really like that a lot, probably too much.
Yeah.
Now, the alcohol difference, I mean, there's not really much of a difference.
Yeah, we went up to 10% from 9.4.
Up from 9.4 to 10.
Yep.
And is that solely from the fact that
bourbon.
It's the bourbon? That
it is bourbon. Now, over time, it could also be what we call the angel share, but in 4 months, I wouldn't think too much of that happens. What can happen, though, is when you age, you can age beer in a new oak barrel that has no alcohol in it, and a year later, you could test that beer and find out that it, in fact, is higher in alcohol. And this could happen because perhaps there's still fermentation going on. There might be some wild yeast still in there. That's not happening here. or you get evaporation. So over time, remember, oak is semi-porous, so water will evaporate out, and this is what we call the angel share. And you look at barrels as they age, the levels deplete because some water is evaporating out, and that will also result in a different concentration, a higher concentration of alcohol by volume. So that's another way it can happen.
Now, what would you pair each of these with?
So Double Trouble is classically difficult because of its like super dry nature, not a lot of malt sweetness there, but it can work with all manner of fried and salty foods. You know, bitterness kind of gets smothered by fry, so it tastes less bitter. Salt gets amplified by bitterness and then makes the bitterness taste less intense. So thinking, one thing I was just thinking of, because I think the weather is warming up so nicely, is like a BLT, especially as fresher tomatoes become more available. Oh, yeah. But just think about like that kind of that smoked hickory bacon quality balancing against the intense bitterness. That tropical fruit in the nose is almost like a marmalade. Excellent with tomatoes, but also kind of seasons the mayo as well.
Frankly, so everything goes well with bacon.
Yeah, that's in fact is true. And then I'm almost more enamored with the possibilities of Doom. You'd think it would be more difficult because it's stronger and it's got all this, it's bourbon barrel aged and things like that. But actually, the bourbon barrel aging brings in a wonderful sweetness that I think lends it more. So double cheeseburgers, something that's rich and greasy and has lots of like oozy cheese qualities. Fantastic with sweeter, more malt-driven Imperial IPAs. So I'm thinking like Dogfish Head 90 Minute. It has a rich malt, awesome with cheeseburgers. But here, the sweetness is from the bourbon and from the barrels. Would be great. It would be great with that. But we could also do it with dessert. Carrot cake is probably the most classic dessert pairing with IPAs, pale ales, and Imperial IPAs. But also, I'm thinking something like a peach cobbler would work really nicely with this.
That would be good. The sweetness from the crumbly part on the top, or the cobbler.
And I should also mention, one of the cool things about Founders is, and we probably talked about this before, I can't think of another brewery that was as close to extinction that has become as popular and sought out as Founders. They started in the late 90s when a lot of breweries were actually closing just because there was more beer out there than people were interested in. Lots of brewers making just kind of ho-hum things that weren't really that exciting. Lots of consumers weren't really educated on craft beer, weren't seeking it out like they are today. And then, of course, there were a lot of people who were just trying to cash in on craft beer and not making exceptional products. So, the strong and best survived, and luckily that includes Founders. They were on the brink of extinction because they were making quality beers, no flaws, balanced beers, but they were just kind of following what everybody else was making, an amber, a pale ale, and nothing was really standing out. And so they decided that if they were going to go down, they were going to go down their way and make beers they wanted to drink and kind of roll the dice one last time. And that's where Dirty Bastard came from, that really big, intense Scotch ale, wee heavy style with a hint of roast, dry finish. Now it seems routine for brewers to make strong, intense beers, but back then it stood out and it quickly developed a cult following. And what's exceptional about Founders is they've continued that to this day. It seems that along with releases that we are constantly awaiting, like KBS, there is something new that comes out and gets people excited, like Doom.
That is a cool story. I mean, you succeed by leading, and sometimes you fail by following. So,
that's right. And
I'm glad it worked out for them, as you said.
Oh yeah, especially because of what they're bringing out. I mean, it's cool. Dave Engbers and Mike Stevens are the guys who started the business. They still run it, and they have seen it through the hard times and now into the very great times. And they've been rapidly expanding. I think in 2011 they were somewhere like 42nd biggest craft brewer in the nation. And then in a year's time, as of 2012, they had jumped to 30. So they're doing a lot of great things, and we love their beers.
And here are two of them. Put them on your list.
That's right.
And the craft beer industry itself is growing. You were telling me a little earlier about it. Maybe we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah.
If you've got a question for Greg, here's the email, beeroftheweek@WTOP.com. Greg, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, please always do drink responsibly, and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.